The Legal Mindset Corner will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
One of the things that Answering Legal allows me to do is quickly get back to new clients that are calling, and that's absolutely critical because when you're dealing with a criminal case, time is of the essence. I've been hired because I was the only lawyer who called the person back. Calling means you care. When you call a client back quickly, it means you care. Answering Legal has really allowed me to excel and have personal time with my family and a great quality of life.
Welcome back to the Legal Mindset Corner, sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. My co-host, Becky Howlett, and I, Cynthia Sharp, are devoted to exploring a range of topics that impact lawyer well-being, including mindfulness, work-life integration, digital communication, resilience, healthy communication, and even more. Today, we are privileged to have with us Martha Knudson, Executive Director of the Utah State Bar's Wellbeing Committee. She's a lawyer, speaker, and a consultant. In her description on LinkedIn, what I particularly liked was that she works at the intersection of the legal profession and the science of well-being. Now, she's equipped to do this because while she was practicing full-time as a shareholder in a law firm, she went on to earn a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Furthermore, she has contributed a chapter to the book, The Best Lawyer You Can Be, a guide to physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness. So we know that we are going to all learn a lot today, and we thank you so much, Martha, for agreeing to be a guest.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So what got you into the field of well-being, and how did you become director of the Utah State's Wellbeing Committee for the legal profession?
Well, it was a bit of a road. So all good research is me search. And so, I started out my practice in a law firm as a litigator. And by the time I was at year 10, was a shareholder, I was so incredibly burned out, anxious all the time, unproductive. And I had gone from crushing it with my career, being on top of things, being, sought out to work with, to like this feeling frozen. And so I stepped out of the profession at that time and I'm out. This is not, I thought it was all me, right? I did not at the time, understand all of the more complex systems that are involved in that. So when I got talked out of retirement to go back and work as general counsel for a company, and as I did that, I really wanted to see if I could practice law and stay in a place where I was doing really well professionally and I enjoyed it, and where I can still enjoy my life, have energy for other things. Because I realized that up to that point, I had been making this choice, I could either do well professionally or be well personally. And I thought it was a trade-off. So the research that was me search is going out to figure out what's out there. Are there any lawyers that have figured this out? And at the time, there was really nothing. And so I kept digging. And I came across the science of positive psychology, which is really the science of optimal human performance and the science of thriving. So, I took myself back to school, and it was this epiphany that I'd been making this false choice, that it was not either be well in your life or do well professionally, but that being well drives doing well, and that an overwhelming amount of evidence, scientific research tells us that the things that we do as a lawyer, all of the stresses that come at us and that we have to handle as an attorney, we do better, we perform better, we enjoy it more if we're thriving. And so at that point, it was this, what am I, like, I had just kind of been on default mode going through my life and hadn't been very mindful or intentional about the kinds of things that I needed. I didn't even know at the time exactly what I needed to keep myself healthy. And so that really started this whole journey. And then fast forward a little bit, it really felt like synchronicity, me coming into the work that I am now doing. When I was still practicing, I knew a lot of lawyers because when I was general counsel, I'd hire them or I litigated against them. And some of them ended up on the bench. So this is about the time that the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing came out. And the charge was given by the Chief Justice Council. I'm probably botching the name of that organization. And so our chief judge or chief justice here in Utah, he decided that we were going to look at this here, and they formed a task force. So the lawyers that became judges that knew me, I ended up on the task force and helped to really shape the recommendations that we make and argue for some of the things that we ended up doing. And that's how, the task force concluded we did our job. And the court, this associate justice who's really now taken charge of this, she had the foresight to say, we can't have this just be a volunteer thing. If we really care about this, we need to put resources into having somebody take the torch and push this forward. And so that is really how I ended up contracting with the bar and working with the courts and the law schools here, and doing what I do is just a series of, like I said, synchronicities, kind of all just fell into place.
Well, added to also your bravery and willingness to make a change. And it's what I was hearing, a real awareness, and willingness to delve into and get to know yourself better.
Well, thank you for saying that. At the time there were moments where it felt less brave and more like self-preservation, to really look at this stuff. But it is, I really want to live a examined life. And I find that when I am working on myself, I'm trying to understand myself and putting things in place for me, everything works better. I am better at my job. I am a better parent. I'm probably a better friend and a better spouse. And I just I like life more when I'm putting those things in. Yeah.
And one of the things that stood out to me, Martha, was you said, you hadn't really been practicing a lot of mindfulness, and like we're talking about, that's why we really use mindfulness as a foundation, as a tool to develop that self-awareness. And I wrote down here, because you were saying, you're like, I didn't even know what I needed personally. And, I think that's like the first step to, solving a problem is figuring out there's a problem. And at least at the individual level, I wrote down, people are like plants, because there's no one size fits all. You might have your succulent plant that needs no water, right? And if you water it too much, it'll die. Or you might have this other plant over here that's like, hey, I need water every day or I'm going to droop. And it really depends on the person, right, what we need as an individual to, as you said, to thrive in our professional and personal lives.
Yeah, I think I'm 100% with you on that. As a matter of fact, this morning I was speaking to a new class of lawyers that just were accepted to the bar here in Utah, and we talked about that. And, it's because that really is the first step. If you want to make a change, you have to understand what's there. And we talked a lot about how our bodies and our brains and our emotions, I mean, it's you're so intelligent. And all of these things are signals letting us know how we're doing. And so if we can start to get in tune with like what are our check engine lights, is kind of what I like to call them. And we're all different, right? We all have our own little special go-tos that kind of clue us in on when we're not doing well. But I encourage them to really, give them a list. It's like, hey, start maybe just paying attention to what's going on when you're not doing as well. Like for me, I tend to isolate. I get really grumpy. Like I start hating what I'm doing and I get anxious. And so I've been around the block enough times that if I start seeing these things pop up, I'm like, okay, that's step one. Like, something's going on. And so we talked about that. And then the next step is like paying attention to what are the things that you are doing, or, that you're not doing when you're doing well. What's your environment like? And so, that's kind of that same awareness is like step one, what's up with you? Step two, what do you need? And that what do you need can be really challenging for people. And I think for groups too, because we all have blinders on about stuff, but we're not paying attention. But it is really that awareness is so foundational.
Well, and the awareness, and also as a society, until recent years, it hasn't been okay not to be okay. It hasn't been okay to carve out time for yourself. What are you, a wimp? And like, hey, stiff upper lip. And I think that the new way of thinking is that we don't have to live like this.
The shift that I really noticed with exactly that and with the legal profession was during COVID. And one of the silver linings of that experience is that you saw like individual lawyers and also leaders of organizations like all of a sudden, because with the law, it's been a lot of, at least when I came up, and I think it's still really true, is that caring for yourself and handling stress is something you do on your own time. It's your own business. It's not the business of who you work with, unless the wheels come off the bus, and then we'll step in. But now it's like, okay, wait, this really does impact how people show up at work, how the whole system coordinates, and the light bulb came on for a lot of folks, and so I think that was a positive thing. We got a long way to go, but yeah, definitely people are talking about these things now. People in our legal spaces are asking each other how they're doing and being willing to be vulnerable about how share their stories. And I think that has been a wonderful silver lining to the pandemic.
Yeah, and as we then think about delve into the arena of organizations, which I know that you're all about, getting organizations to develop such practices, is what are a couple of the strategies that you've seen be effective in this arena?
So there's a lot to unpack with this, because when we're talking about our well-being as individuals and as a collective profession, it is something that there's this interplay between individuals and the collective, right? Because we co-create the conditions where we can all thrive. So we have individual things that we can do for ourselves that we can and should be paying attention to. And then we also need to look at in our systems and with organizations, this could be like a legal employer. This could be a more loose kind of bar association kind of a thing, the courts. But it is looking at, with a critical eye, are we creating the conditions that allow people to be well? And that is something that the data on lawyers is not can be grim to some extent, as we all know. We don't need to plow too far into that, but with organizations, I guess the couple most effective things I've seen so far, and remember, we are still very much at the beginning of this, is getting a kind of a mindset shift, an organizational mindset shift to look at, okay, what are we doing, right? Because a lot of times we do stuff on autopilot, like we have policies, we have ways of doing things, ways of interacting in our organizations, that we do it because we've always done it that way. And so it's getting people to stop and say, wait a second. Do we have to do it that way? Is there a benefit to that? Like what can we change, and where are we creating unnecessary sticking points or things that are difficult? And so the first thing is like getting that pause and having organizations and systems think about those sticking places. So that is strategy one that we've been doing. It comes back to that same mindfulness we were talking about with individuals, right? And so the way that we have been doing that here in Utah is a lot of education. We have been going out into the community, talking to different organizations, putting on sessions at the bar and at the law schools, and just really talking about what are these kind of systemic conditions that either cut against thriving or that can really clear the way. So that educational piece has been the primary successful focus. And then the next step is coming into, okay, here are a few things that you can start doing, like in your organization. And that would be the next step. And we're starting working on some of those things.
Yeah, and that shift is slow. That mind state is slow. Cindy is originally from the Midwest, where I also hail from, and as we joke, it's like the change comes in from the coast that like finally reaches us, several decades later. It seems similar in the legal profession. We're very entrenched in those status quo, the way we've always done things. I've been seeing a lot of coverage recently about a female attorney. She was, a prominent partner, and she ultimately threw herself in front of a train, and it just came back that, the report on that, really highlighting that this person was experiencing a mental health crisis when they ultimately decided to take their own life. But what's been really interesting to me is seeing all the comments about this, about the culture of our law firms, of our legal organizations, of our institutions, like you're really talking about, Martha, because so many people are calling out this culture that is not promoting them thriving. It's promoting the opposite, right? Burnout, mental health concerns, suicide, and really talking about how hard and how challenging it's been when, the rubber hits the road to really get a change. So for example, I saw one person was saying, they were working on a deal that was, one of those things where it's like, oh, the deal's coming to a conclusion, so you're really putting in the long hours. And they were in a large firm, and they asked, for additional support on this particular project. And they said they were laughed out of the room, even though there were these attorneys who actually needed hours, they needed more work. But then they were saying it was ultimately, well, our clients want a lean team. That's what the clients want. So we can't put more people on this project, even though you've only slept 6 hours in 4 days. Like that was the state of play.
Those are the conditions that do not allow people to thrive, and it's something that's been perpetuated for so long in different organizations that's a common story that we hear, and there's this old school mentality that is starting to shift. That is, if you are starting to break under pressure, you're starting to have some of those check engine lights come on. It's a personal failing. that somehow you just can't cut it, right?
Mhm.
Instead of that, like, no, this is a very human thing that happens to people when they're under unrelenting stress with no support or resources to help. And that's how resilience has been framed in the legal profession, where the resilience is not that at all. Like, the science talks about so much about how it is building our own personal and like relational resources, and being in an organization where you feel like you were supported, where you're perceived that you were respected for who you are, where you're recognized, where you are encouraged to take care of yourself. Those kinds of things are what make us resilient and able to operate at our highest levels. It's not saying that you don't work hard when you need to, because that's part of the profession too, but it's like this unrelenting pace where you're not supposed to be human and you're not supposed to need to rest. It is like, it's so toxic. And that is I really believe that lends itself to some of the troubling numbers we see in our population. And it doesn't have to be that way. And that's where this mindset shift is starting to take place. You said something else, and that brings to mind like about the woman who stepped in front of the train. I hear from lawyers a lot who have thoughts that come into their mind about doing something similar. I mean, I myself, when I was a young associate, I remember like going to lunch and thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if a bus just took me out? Because then I wouldn't have to like deal with that thing that I'm dealing with. And it was a fleeting thought, and which I think is, can be normal for people to have from time to time. But I hear that from a lot of lawyers, that they like swerve my car into traffic. And that is a like canary in a coal mine that something needs to change. But we also have this, we're really great performers in the law. We are so good at showing up and looking professional, presenting ourselves in a way that like, we got this. I mean, and a lot of times we need to do that for our clients, right? And so I think that is also something, it's a really great skill that we all have. But then add to that, though, recognize that there's always stuff going on with people, with our colleagues, and there's always pain in the room. And there's, so there's a lot to unpack with this stuff, but it is, we need to care for each other more.
And as we look at one of the things that you or that Becky mentioned about like, the clients want a lean team. Well, we want well attorneys because well attorneys are going to give better service. You're going to have better product, better results. And so I think a lot of it is a matter of putting your foot down and educating your clients. Yes. And I know I was in big law for 2 years and 2 different firms. And I said, whoa, this is not for me. And so I started my own law firm. And if there was a client who was just didn't resonate with our values, certainly we put up with stuff, is that I would fire the client. And I often fired the client. It would be in front of my staff. Like my staff would be, because then they knew it would often be, there'd be the last thing that triggered the straw that broke the camel's back. No, you don't talk to my receptionist that way. Yes. And it was just amazing. I remember one client then begged me, please keep me on. I said, you get one chance. Yeah. And I think that even at the corporate level, that it's good if attorneys you're always going to have the firm that's going to take the case and take the client. But guess what? There's lots of other clients out there, and go spend your time attracting the quality people you want to work with.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because it's too often I hear the client won't pay for that, or, I'm the client, so I don't care how you're doing. I mean, I've heard it from both sides, the client side and also the attorney side. And, that really does come down to, if you're in a position of leadership at your, like if you're at a firm, right? Or if you are, if you're a client, but let's look at if you're the lawyer that's representing the client, that's a wonderful time to check in with your values and with the values of your organization. It's like, how are you valuing your team? And is it profits over people at all costs? A lot of times it can be that way, and you might make the money, but that's a short-term thing. You're going to grind through people. And, if you really want to have lawyers and staff and legal professionals that you're working with in your organization that take on extra role behaviors, that are willing to put in the time when it's needed, then showing up for them in that kind of situation, like you did when you fired that client in front of your staff, and showing up for them, that is something that, man, talk about having your organization value you for something more than just being a producer. That is so super powerful. And the evidence supports that those are the kinds of things that, that helps keep your team healthy. And we need more people that are willing to stand up and do that. It can be a scary thing, I know, because of the way that our compensation systems can be set up. And these are some of the things in the systems too, right? That wait a second, we can take a different look on this. Just because it's always been a certain way, does it have to be that way? We're creative people. We're lawyers. I know, yes, we deal with precedent and rules, but hey, let's open our scope a little bit.
And all that being said, I do want to clarify that I love profits.
Yeah.
I think that when I was practicing law, it was like I'm very micromanage about what's going on with the numbers. Becky will attest to that. However, I think that if you look at it in a way that my numbers in the long run are actually going to be better if I'm not having people burn out and leaving, and that I have history and solidarity with the workforce, that you're going to have a better life. You're going to want to show up to work as well as those around you.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Because it's not really like profits and people are mutually exclusive. No. That's not the case at all. It's just that you can have both, right? But there was a study that came out in 2022 that Patrick Krill did, looking at how lawyers felt valued by their organizations, and if they felt valued for their professionalism, their perceived stress went down, their health was better, their attrition rates were lower, right? But if you felt like you were only valued for profits, you were far more stressed, your health was worse, And so it's like, how do you find all those moments that you can protect your staff from things like you were saying with a client that's tough, or that you can recognize them for the work that they do. And then also, like you said, expand your frame. Oftentimes, if you're in an organization like a private law firm, the traditional way is that you look at things through a 12-month lens.
Yeah.
And that is really not conducive to this idea of the long term, right? It's like, how can you widen your frame beyond that?
Another issue that I see with lawyers is that there's such a standard of perfection. And it's difficult because we don't want mistakes in our work.
Right.
We want to win our cases. We want our transactions to be in our client's favor. On and on and on. But I remember when I was in law school, I worked full time, and there was one of the jobs I started. The person sat me down and said, "Here's how we operate here. If it's not perfect, it's wrong." I said, "Oh man, here we go again." And I don't know that there's any solution to that. Just an observation.
I think, well, and the research, I think, on this also would support this, is that perfectionism actually holds us back. Mm-hmm. And as lawyers, it's tricky though, because, right, we don't want to make mistakes. But if we're so afraid that we're going to make a mistake that we don't push ourselves or challenge ourselves in a new direction, then we don't grow and reach the edge of our potential. So there's that piece. So you're missing out on talent and satisfaction for yourself, talent for your organization. And also, making mistakes happens to all lawyers. Most mistakes you can fix, right. And it's having somebody that is higher up in the organization, other people being able to be like, yeah, listen, this happened to me one time, relate that normalize that sometimes that happens. We have a high standard, but don't be afraid to, if something happens, come talk to me about it, right? That's that creating that psychological safety. But then on the flip side of that, there's this idea, if we have that perfectionism in ourselves and it is supercharged, which for a lot of us as attorneys, it can be, then that can create some mental health concerns, because say you do 99% of a project well, you knock it out of the park. But there's that 1% that, you're like, ugh. And all you fixate on is that one thing. And so then you create this belief and narrative in your head that man, I suck. And it's, then you can get into the imposter syndrome stuff and you just suck the joy out of yourself. It's a motivation killer. Right. And then you just hamstring yourself. So there's a lot of problems with perfectionism. And so I struggle with this, and I struggle with feeling like an imposter. So I have this mantra that I am, that I tell myself is progress, not perfection. Mm-hmm. Progress, not perfection. And then when I inevitably make a mistake on something, instead of ruminating, which is another thing I can do to myself, it's I try to think of all the things. Okay, what really did go well? All right, what did you learn from this? And just try to be a little soft with myself, which is another thing that can be really hard for lawyers, I think, is because we're drivers. We're achievers.
And I'm listening to Adam Grant's most recent book, Hidden Potential, on Audible. And in this morning's segment, he talked about that the super learners are those who are comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I just loved that observation.
I was just going to say that, Cynthia, because when Martha was talking, I was thinking, and you were talking about, if we don't push ourselves outside of that comfort zone, we're not going to grow. And yeah, you can only grow from a place of discomfort. And I know you're not the originator of this saying, Cynthia, but you taught it to me, so I give you credit. But my kind of mantra that I try to live by in that state of mind is there are no failings, only learnings. And that has helped me so much, because then any moment I'm meeting, no matter what it is, if I can turn on that mind state, it's oh my God, and get excited instead, and reframe the excitement instead of anxiousness. It's oh, this is an opportunity for me to learn this. And now I'm going to go forward. I'm going to have this knowledge. I'm going to have this experience, this wisdom. And now I can add this to my toolkit into the future, and I'm going to be better prepared going forward.
And when we talk about co-creating our mental health and our well-being in this profession, being able to have a leader or a colleague or a mentor model that for you, for me, that would have been amazing. Yes, we know we have our ethical standards, we have our responsibilities to our clients, and those are very, very important. And we're human. And so having somebody, and many other people, being able to walk young lawyers through this or other lawyers through this is a way to really, I think, help everybody be a better attorney, instead of, people hiding when something goes haywire. That's always like the cover up is always worse than the crime, right?
Right.
But that is a really wonderful example, though, I think, of how, as a collective, we can just make those little changes, and being willing to be a little vulnerable with others can really rise, raise all tides, I guess. All tides raise all boats, or whatever that.
A rising tide floats all boats.
There you go.
Can you tell we really like the colloquialisms and the turn of phrase? Again, it must be a Midwestern thing. But to your point, Martha, I'm so glad you brought that up about, being a human and making money in the context of the law. And these aren't mutually exclusive things. And, in our work, I just don't think we can underplay what you're saying, the value of having that culture from the top down, having leaders having the decision makers in positions of power that are showing up and are walking the walk, and not just, we're going to have the conversation about well-being. We're going to sign the ABA pledge and then we're going to do nothing, because the research, as I'm sure you're aware, shows that that's actually going to have an inverse negative effect on your, organization's internal culture, because then it's going to breed resentment. Like, hey, they actually don't care about us. So, from your expertise and especially your experience in this position with the task force, what are some recommendations that, decision makers, leaders in these institutions, what can they do to truly prioritize attorney well-being?
Okay. Yes. Let me give you an outline here. So, number one, avoid at all costs the well-being washing. Don't just sign a pledge and slap a couple of shiny things on it, because that is not going to help anybody. And number two, form a working group, like a committee, or an internal task force with leaders on it, and have influential leaders who are willing not to just say, I'm the head of this, but who are really going to model behavior, right? So we need to not just have higher up say, we're going to do this. It's like they need to be modeling behavior. So get people like that, have different stakeholders within an organization, like a paralegal, staff member, younger attorneys, to work together on what is it that we can do. Then the next step for that group to start would be doing an internal audit of your system. And this is not just your formal policies and procedures. This is also kind of that hidden, just the way we do stuff. Because a lot of times, like we said earlier, we do things just because we always have, and we do it mindlessly. We're not even thinking about how might this be either helping us or hurting us. And so just kind of taking an assessment about what's going on, and you might find some really easy things that you can shift. So that would be the next thing. And then the third, and I think this is the most important thing that impacts so many of the other well-being tools and resources that we have, both internally and externally. Really, how are we treating each other? And just how are we communicating with each other? Are we recognizing people's strengths? Are we only noticing when things go wrong? How are we communicating value? In what ways are we allowing our people to feel like they are autonomy supportive? Are we helping to build each other's mastery of different areas in the law? And a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about, and we could spend hours on this, but it's not that it is so hard to do. It's not complicated. It's just you have to kind of build the habit on how you're communicating with the people that you work with. Get a little bit of education on these things. Okay, how do I work with a younger lawyer and give an assignment or give feedback in a way that I am ticking the boxes that help them feel like they're valued. And then it's a little bit of education and then just practice. So we can really build these resources in ourselves and in the people that we work with a little bit of training, with a little bit of deliberate practice. And before long, it becomes just part of how we are working. So the legal profession, our systems are stressful. There's things about this that we are not going to change like anytime soon. But there are those pockets of unnecessary stress that we create by the way that we're interacting in our organizations. And so like there's this stuff that the way we do things that might be creating unnecessary stress, and we can move those things to the side. And there's also, we create unnecessary stress and difficulty by the way we're interacting. Like maybe we're ignoring. It doesn't have to be that you're being like overtly difficult to somebody else. It could be you just are so in your own stuff that you are not taking the moment to connect, like make eye contact in the hall, to give a little bit more information, to bring a new associate in on a project you're working on. I mean, right. Does that make sense? I'm kind of jumping around a lot of different places, but I think really if we could just all collectively decide that we were going to be a little introspective on how we're showing up for other people, I think we could make big strides just with that. But that takes time. And it takes leaders that are willing to model that behavior, to learn it and model it.
And great intention.
Yeah.
What you're saying makes perfect sense. As you were giving that example, I was thinking back to my own life. When I was a young associate attorney in big law in DC, the communication internally was probably 90% of my stress. Just oh my God, thinking that someone's mad at me via the email. Yeah. And then I'm sitting there for, trying for hours trying to craft this perfect email because I'm afraid to just go into their office and talk to them. And it's like, that was seriously like 90% of the stress. And if there had just been that open pathway, like you're saying, and just acknowledgement, because there wasn't, when there, in the instances where I was struggling and I was kind of sharing that with leadership, it was the whole, oh, well, in my day, and this is a rite of passage, and welcome to the firm. And it was like, this isn't helping me. Like, doubling down on the toxicity is not helping me.
Oh, I remember having so many similar things happen, and then it takes up so much mental energy and emotional energy because you're like, what did I do? And 9 times out of 10, you didn't do anything. It was just that they're communicating in a way like maybe they sent you an email in all caps, and you interpret that as, why are they yelling at me? And that kind of stuff is like, it would be so easy for someone to just be like, okay, I am going to be I'm going to take 30 more seconds and be thoughtful about how I communicate this. And so, just to be clear for everyone listening, is that we're not talking about, like, you don't need to hug and, like, brush each other's hair at the office. I mean, actually, I probably don't want to do that. So it's not like you have to be best friends with everybody, but it's really respectful engagement. It is just those micro moments of connection that we have. And even if if you're one of those people, and I hope that you're not, but if you don't really care how everybody else is doing, you care about your work and how it shows up, right? And by treating people in this way and taking a little bit of time to think about how you're communicating and what you're communicating and, maybe what you're not, it's going to help the work product that flows back to you. It's going to, those relationships, it's a virtuous cycle that leads to all good things, professionally and personally.
I know a realization that's helped me as I've entered my senior years of maturity is that there are a lot of emotionally immature adults out there, and that they, no matter what I say or do, they're not going to change. And so because they can't, they're
Right.
stuck. They don't
Right.
understand. And
Yes.
so when I run across somebody like that who's belligerent, who is, however they manifest their immaturity, is that I just think to myself, I try to get my compassionate hat on.
Yeah.
That's a person who's immature, and may they get the help they need, and
Yeah.
that it's not about me. I think that's one of the most
Yeah.
difficult things to learn. It's not about me.
Yes.
Here's that boundary.
And I think that's something that does come with age. As I've gotten older, I have recognized that more and more. Although I think that the younger generation is better at that in a lot of ways. And in doing this, in doing this work, this is some of the conclusion that I've had. We're trying to change, convince and change hearts and minds, and however you want to say it, is that there's a group of us that really want to understand and really want to do better and are willing to do something. There's a group of us that are just a-holes and are going to be, and you're not going to change them, right? And that is just going to be like a process of, there's always going to be those. And then the vast majority of us are kind of in the middle, where we're just too focused on the task in front of us and too caught up in how we do things, and then just the grind, that we are on autopilot, and we are probably not even recognizing that some of the ways that we are interacting with each other could be impacting another lawyer or staff member in a negative way. And so it's that group, I think we have a lot of opportunity, and that comes back again to that self-awareness. How do we encourage people to take a pause and think about, that's something that I could do differently. I mean, I remember in my practice when I was at my law firm, this was my first moment of wait a second, I can impact, how other people are doing. So I had this awesome assistant. I was there early one morning, and I don't remember what it was. It was something from opposing counsel on a case that had probably made me crazy or whatever. But, so my assistant came in, and I just started oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. I was just venting to her about this situation, and she started to cry. And I was like, wait, are you okay? What? Why are you crying? And she's like, I'm so sorry. What? I don't know what I did. And I am so glad that she cried and said that to me, because I would have lost probably an awesome assistant and had no idea why. It was my tone of voice and my high energy at her so early in the morning that she didn't hear the words that I was saying, because I didn't say anything negative about her. She took my tone of voice and my body language. And, that was a big wake up call for me, because we're getting messages all the time from people that we are around. And only, I think it's 7% of the actual message is the words that we're saying.
Yeah.
It's the tone, it's the non-verbal stuff. So, that was a big thing where I'm like, okay, I need to be more aware of how I'm interacting with other people, because, so that was my first wake up call.
We talked about some of the advantages that the pandemic gave us, but then we also come up with a lot of disadvantages, some obvious and not some more subtle. And one is that we're on 24/7, because our homes became workstations. And one of the things I really liked is as one of the emails that I got from you, is that your email sign off mentions that you work flexibly and you do not expect immediate responses outside of others' working hours. And if everybody, including partners in law firms, would put that kind of disclaimer on their email, perhaps the world would be a better place.
Isn't it funny how something so simple can make a difference? I have people comment on that statement a lot. And that, it's a perfect example of some of the little small things that we can do to better support others and communicate that your time and the way that you work is important. I could not have it on there. I still feel the same way about it, right? But we, like Becky, how you were saying, you got the message from a partner when you were in big law and your brain was all thinking about it. It's the absence of saying things sometimes that really can make a difference. It could be, you are set to go on vacation and you're working with people. They don't say anything about you going on vacation. So you spend the whole vacation being convinced that you should be working because they're upset, when really they're like, oh, cool, she went on vacation. So like the simple thing would be, hey, Becky, have so much fun on your vacation. Is there anything that you need me to be aware of? We're going to watch this, and I don't want you checking in. We will let you know if we need you. Right there. What did that took me? However many seconds. And that just takes this whole load off somebody that you're working with. And that allows them to go on a vacation and get the rest and recovery you need. And so in our organizations, having those kinds of conversations and normalizing, like, okay, listen, we need to talk about what are boundaries for technology. If you're working at home, we want you to unplug. And what does that look like for us? Maybe you're working on a huge case and you need somebody to be on call. Like, that night, shift that around. Like, let's make sure that we are actively talking about how to create boundaries with work, because, I think the data is being collected about all the remote work and all those kinds of things. And I think there's good things and there's negative things about that. That's the topic for a whole other podcast probably. But just, again, having that communication so everyone understands the expectations. And so you don't spend all that time and energy worrying about it.
Stress-laxing instead of actually relaxing.
Yes! No, I like that. Stress-laxing. I am going to steal that from you. That is such a beautiful phrase.
But it's so real. It's so real to your point. So, this has been such a fabulous conversation, Martha. You were just like such a kindred spirit. We're loving this, and such practical and, like you're saying, simple things. It doesn't have to be complicated. We can take these small steps and make really positive change. Because if you just keep taking one small step, after a while, you look back and you see how far you've come. So thank you so much. Yes! Oh my gosh, baby steps. Yes.
Yep. Well, the time has certainly flown. I wish we could allocate more time, but for now, Martha, do you have any closing words of wisdom that you want to share?
My hope for the profession and for everyone in it is that we start to think of and have a mindset that our well-being and taking care of our well-being is really part of our professional development, that we need to give it the same care and attention in training things within ourselves and within our colleagues on how to care for ourselves. Because if we do those things, it makes our technical skills as lawyers really sing. It is those well-being skills and resources that allow us to deploy our skills at the highest level. So it's just, think about maybe right now am I prioritizing those things? Am I connecting that to how I'm doing professionally? And if you're not, maybe spend some time thinking about how you can.
Well, thank you so much. And to our viewers, if you haven't had a chance to explore the services offered by Answering Legal, now is the time. And while you're at it, check out the information that we offer for free at legalburnout.com. This is Cindy Sharp and Becky Howlett, your co-hosts. And until we meet again, just
breathe.